Good morning. Here we are at Temple Baptist Church again, and we're looking we since the last time I was here, we've jumped all the way over into the third chapter of the book of Joshua, and appreciate the other guys that have filled in on that. And today we are chapters 3 and 4 deal with the the 40 years of the wilderness wandering is over. They've come up and they've been camped on the east side of the Jordan River there, uh, and at a place out there about I don't know really how far it is, not long, a few miles from the Jordan River. And they've been there and they're getting some last minute travel instructions about going over into the promised land, the land that God has promised Abraham. And so they that's what these two chapters deal with. And the chapter 3 is the crossing of the river, and then chapter 4 deals with what's happened after that. Now these lessons, there's three things in here that we really need to see right off the bat. And one is that God's presence is with them. Of course, He's been all through the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. He has never left them. He's always been there. And He has, even before the 40 years and the coming out of Egypt, He's shown His power and authority. And then in the last thing that He wants people to remember, and that's what these lessons are about today, is when God makes a promise, He's good to His word. You don't have to worry about it. Sometimes we get anxious about what God's going to do, or more than likely, it's how God's going to do it that gives us our anxiety issues. And so, anyway, this has come up now. It's in the spring of the year. The Jordan River is flooded. It's gone from being just a kind of a small stream, probably even smaller than our Black River here in town. Well, no doubt it is smaller. And but now it's the time of the barley harvest. It's in the spring of the year. They're getting ready. Actually, when they cross over into to Canaan land, what's going to be their land, they'll celebrate their first Passover and basically what's their new home. And so that's kind of bringing us up to date in that. But we have to realize that the Jordan River has probably tripled, maybe quadrupled in size and width, and it's flooded. And if any of y'all have ever been around a real flood, they're scary. They are scary to be involved in. So anyway, that kind of brings you up to date. It's kind of interesting that Joshua, he's just been given the leadership of these millions of people by Moses. Moses has died. Moses gave him the word that, okay, now you're the leader here. But leadership kind of has to be earned. And sometimes people don't follow leaders until they understand that they know what they're doing. But there has to be a trust in that. And so not Moses, but Joshua has come before him back over there in chapter 3, verse 5. And it said, Joshua said unto the people, sanctify yourself, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And there is some things, I think about that sometimes, that in that, back over in the book of Exodus, in chapter 19 and verse 10, it says, and the Lord said unto Moses, go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow. And there's some things that when we come before the Lord that we need to be clean. First thing He told them, He said, wash your clothes. Come before me clean in body and spirit. And this is the very first thing He said. And then there's some other things that He said. And He said not to come up to the mount. Remember, this is back in the book of Exodus. And then He talked about some sexual things in there. But there's things that we ought to realize that God's God and we're not. He is high and uplifted and supreme. And I think we need, especially in this day and time that we live in, we need to respect that and realize that He is God, and we're subjects, we're servants underneath Him, and so we need to do that. Now, in chapters 3 and 4, God mentions in His Word here in the book of Joshua 17 times. There's at least 17 references in these 2 chapters to the Ark of the Covenant, and we have to know right off the bat that the Ark represents the very presence of God to these Hebrew people out there. He has led them for 40 years. Well, He's led them from the time they left Egypt, and he's protected them. He's watched over them. We talked about that a while ago, that in the thing that God has the power and the presence of them, and His presence here in these lessons is in the Ark of the Covenant. That is His symbol of His active presence with these people. Now, in the wilderness wanderings, he's been a cloud of fire and a cloud, and that kind of thing, fire by night and the cloud during the day, and he's led and directed them all the way down through there. And now, but now in this, and beginning actually in chapter 3, verse 14, it says, "And it came to pass when the people removed their tents." Now remember, they've been over on the east side of Jordan, and they're getting ready to go to the river itself. And it says, to pass over the Jordan River, and the priest bearing the Ark of the Covenant before the people. At this point, the Ark is out in front of the people. The Word says that they have to be 2,000 or 3,000 feet away from the Ark, and God's going to be out there in front of them, leading the way in that. And it said, as they bear the Ark of the Covenant, were coming to, as they that bear the Ark. These were the priests. By the way, when you study this and you look at this, these priests were Kohathites. They were not the ones. They were the ones that normally picked up in the tent of the tabernacle. He picked it up and carried it and moved everything. But this time and now these Kohathites are the ones that are actually going to pick up the covenant, pick up the Ark of the Covenant, and they were going to carry it out into the river, and they were going to stay with that while they were doing that. But that takes some digging to find that out, but trust me, it's there. And it says, that's a scary phrase, trust me, but look for yourself, dig it up yourself. And as they that bear the ark were come unto Jordan, and the feet of the priests that bear the ark were dipped into the brim of the water, for Jordan overflowed all the banks all the time of this harvest, this barley harvest. I don't know now. If this was in our regular Sunday school class, I might go with this thing about how much faith did it take to be one of those priests that carried that, especially the first 2, to stick your feet into this flooded water and trust God, walk in faith would be the point that I would make, and probably will when I'm in a regular class with all the class. But our faith walk. Where is our faith walk? And we really need to think about that from time to time. Paul over in the New Testament says, examine yourself, to see whether these things be so. And talking about the different places that Paul preached, and he said over and over, examine yourself, examine your faith. Are you where you need to be in the Lord? And I kind of need to get off of that and move on a little bit, but the Scripture says there, the water. It says the last part of verse 15. Said, for Jordan overfloweth all its banks all the time of the harvest, that the waters which came down from above stood and rose up upon a heap very far from the city of Adam, which was several miles upstream from where they were. And this, I was reading some things about how come people were so skeptical about this, but in that scripture it says that the water dammed up there by that city, far up from where they were. And remember, now we're talking about millions of people that are going to have to cross the Jordan, not just 100 or 1,000 even, but thousands of people are going to have to cross that. And I don't know if you've ever walked through muddy water. It just could not have happened without it being a supernatural happening. And it says that is besides Zeradon, and those that came down towards the sea of the plain, even the salt sea or the Dead Sea, failed and were cut off, and the people passed over right against Jericho. This this the water dammed up upstream, so it stopped coming down, and then the water that was there flowed on out into the Dead Sea and left dry ground. And that's another God thing. This really is more of a miracle than God dividing the Red Sea when all things are considered about this. And so it says there, and the priests that bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all the Israelites passed over on dry ground until all the people were passed clean over Jordan. There's an application to be made there for us, that in our New Testament application, we see that God's God. He didn't leave anybody there. It says that all the people passed over, not a few. None of them were lost. And we like to make a lot of once saved, always saved. But God didn't lose anybody that He's picked out, anybody that has humbled themselves and asked for repented and asked for forgiveness. God didn't leave anybody out. He's not going to leave anybody behind. When it's time for the rapture of the church, whatever time, not getting into that thing about pre-trib, post-trib, all that stuff, let it go. This thing, God's not going to leave anybody behind that is His. And He did not here. This is the New Testament application for this, is that God is... He's faithful in His promises, and He said He's not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. So God knows who will and who doesn't, and knows the ones that make false professions and don't believe it. But God knows that stuff, and He's not going to lose anybody that is serious about that. And so we walk through that, and we look at that these priests, they stepped out into the middle of the Jordan River on faith, hoping that, another angle on that, what about Joshua? Joshua has issued these commands, these seemingly impossible commands that somewhere, just like here at Temple Baptist Church, our pastor, Brother Mike, he's been here since Easter, and he's been kind of feeling his way in, one of the first things he said was he wasn't planning on making any major changes for a long time, or not for a long time, for 6 months is what he said. But people, he needed time to learn us. We needed time to learn him, to have confidence in his decisions and what he says. And he always preaches the word right straight down the line, just like our former pastor, Brother Steve, did, and he didn't miss a lick. But the point that I need you to understand is he is the leader. He's God's man in God's place and God's time. But still yet, that all that being said, and we believe all that, we just have to develop that faith in his leadership. And I have seen him make a couple of pretty tough decisions, and he's stood by them and made good decisions, and the church is moving forward because of that, just like these guys did. And I wanted to really point that out here in this beginning of this time. So, all right, what we've done, we've crossed the Jordan River. What are we going to do now? Well, we come to this part of our lesson. It talks about memorial stones. Now, my wife and I, we have the prepaid funeral thing. We did all that years ago. All that is in place. we have our stone set together out in a city cemetery here at Poplar Bluff. And it's got our name on it, and of course, and on the back of it, it's got parents of Susan Diana and Stephen Wayne Fortenberry, and it on the front of it though, of course it's got our names and our birth dates on both of us, and one day I'll have the death date on that. But we have, excuse me, we have up on the left-hand corner of it, above my name, there's a symbol up there, and it's a carpenter symbol, and it's a picture of carpenter tools. There's a tape measure, a hammer, I think a framing square. But over on Izetta's side of it, there's like a grandmother in a rocking chair, and it's there. And we thought, well, now what do we want to put on that? So anyway, we had put right in the center of it, for whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved, because we wanted to have a testimony after we left other than just who we were. And so we see it, that stone, it says that I was a carpenter, and Izetta was a grandma, a mother, housewife, and that we were Christians. It says those three things. So stones tell a story. And all out in a city cemetery, and you go by and you read all the epitaphs that are on those, and you see all those things. But there's a reason for those stones, and that's so that somebody might remember you. We have a stone right next to ours that we set that's in memory of our daughter. She's buried over by Rogersville, Missouri, in a little country cemetery, and that's where she's at. But we have a stone, a remembrance stone, and that's what these are. It says memorial stones, but they're remembrance, to remember that something happened here, something special happened there. And so it says there in verse 1 of chapter 14, and when all the people were clean passed, there's that word, all the people, a second time there, and just a couple of verses that it's got that the Lord spake unto Joshua, saying, Take ye 12 men out of the people, out of every tribe, and command them, saying, Take ye hence out of the midst of Jordan, out of the place where the priest's feet stood firm, 12 stones, and they represented each one of the tribe of Israel. And you shall carry them over with you, and leave them in the lodging place. And when you read this and you study it, in fact, it'll say it a little bit later on, that they crossed over Jordan. They picked these stones up for where the Ark of the Covenant, representing God in the midst of the flooded river there, that they picked these stones up, and it says it took them to the lodging place where you shall lodge this night. And that was at a place called Gilgal. That was across the river, turn north, going upriver, and there was a place there that's where they made their staging camp to begin their assault on Jericho, as you read about that. And in the history of Israel, that was a very special place. But then it said, Then Joshua called the 12 men whom he had prepared to the children of Israel out of every tribe, a man. And Joshua said unto them, Pass over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take ye up every man a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of Israel. And that's where I told you there just a few minutes ago about our stone. Every one tells a story, and they're there for a reason. And he says in verse 6 that the sign among you that the children ask their fathers in time to come, what do these mean? You know, we have, as a nation, every nation has places of memorials. We've been to the Lincoln Memorial, the Vietnam War Memorial, Georgia, all those in Washington, D.C. We've been to those, and you see them if you go downtown here in Poplar Bluff. Down on 5th Street, you can see the memorial to veterans that have passed away, and not all are Vietnam veterans. My dad's name's on there. He was a World War II veteran, and people like that, but they all tell a story. There's a story behind every name on that wall downtown. And these stones, they God wanted them left there, and he commanded Joshua, you take these stones and leave them there, because one of these days your kids need to understand that great things happened right here. And they're going to have an opportunity to say, hey, Dad, what, or Grandpa, what's these stones, this pile of stones mean here? Why are they here when there's no others? Now, there's another thing about these stones that tell a story to us. And one of them is they've been out in the Jordan River, and the river's washed over them and washed over them and washed over them. And the edges are rounded off, smooth them, like you go over into Current River and you see where the current has rounded those stones off. Well, in our life, in my life, and I'm sure yours too, we see where the tribulations of life kind of polishes us up and makes us like diamonds. It says the trying of tribulation, the trying of your faith worketh patience. And those are the things that God's shining us up. Nobody likes tribulation. Nobody likes to go through those hard times, but hard times are a part of life. Just like these stones, they didn't have any choice in the matter. They were there, and they were being treated and fixed to where at some point in time, these men from these 12 tribes of Israel was going to set these stones up there, and people were going to come by and ask about them in times past. And so that's kind of that way with us. I have had a dear friend, served with him as a deacon back years ago, and he was known for his calm demeanor. No matter what happened, nothing shook him up. And I've always wanted to emulate that, be that kind of a leader, that kind of a deacon that didn't panic over every time the waves got a little high or things been strange. And I know, spiritually speaking, that sometimes to get like that, you have to have some tough lessons. And we've had some lately, but we're not going to dwell on those things. But he says, in verse 6, it says, what do you mean by these stones? And he said, you shall answer them, and this is what you're going to tell the kids. You know, I have our granddaughter and our grandson, they graduated from high school this year, just here a few weeks ago. And I asked Emma the other day, being a Vietnam veteran, I said, Emma, what did they teach you in school about the Vietnam War? Because I had a lady here at church ask me about speaking about that, and she said nothing. She said hardly nothing as we went through our classes, just a bare mention of it and then going on. And that's sad because, you know, we teach about our very beginning. We have monuments all over the nation about the Revolutionary War, and not just to glorify war, but what people did to maintain our freedoms. And we lose that if we don't have memorials and we don't teach our kids that there's been a lot of issues in a building of our nation. And it's the same thing with that. That's what he said, that this is what you're going to tell them when they ask about that the waters of Jordan were cut off from before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, or they were dammed up back at Adam, and then when it crossed over Jordan, the waters of Jordan were cut off, or they were stopped. And these stones shall be a memorial unto the children of Israel. That's a point, unto the children of Israel forever. And our monuments, we build them to last. We don't build them to put it up here one day and take them down the next. And it's so sad in the last years, we've heard this cry mostly out of people that don't realize the effort and the blood that was shed for us and for them, that they just don't know about that because they've not been taught about that. And so it's a sad deal. So anyway, I'm 5 minutes out of time, and I still got a good chunk here that I need to go. So I'm going to flip through that pretty quick. But it says there in verses 8 and 9, for the children of Israel, they created these memorials. Actually, there's two of them, one in the Jordan River that would be there when the waters come back in, but also the one at Gilgal. And they both tell the same story. But the children of Israel did as Joshua commanded and took up 12 stones out of the midst of Jordan. This kind of goes with the same thing that I was talking about earlier about respecting your leaders. They're there for a reason. They're there appointed by God. I don't have the time to tell you about how the process of Brother Mike went to call him here, but it was God in it from the very, very beginning. And so you have these memorials, you have these men that were following the direction of God. And when that happens, great things happen in church. And we're seeing it right here. Brother Steve did a excellent job in his 25 years here, and we all hated to see him go. But there come a time, and it was in God's time, that the page had to turn. And now Brother Mike is here, and he's going to lead us into greater things. And that doesn't mean that he's any better or more efficient than Brother Steve. The page is just turned, and it's time to move on. And so that's what we do. So I'm going to quit there. And this is probably one of the longest one of these I've ever done. But anyway, come and see us at Temple Baptist Church. We have services at 8 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, and then at 9 o'clock we'll have Bible study groups and for all ages. Got a very active youth group these days, and we're glad for that. Then we'll have our second worship service at 10 o'clock. And so come and see us. We'd love to see you and have you share God, or let us share God with you. And so if you want to feel like you're around somebody that cares, come and see us. And so we thank you for that, and thank you for the time here.